Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode, a very special episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from Lord of the Rings, the card game. I'm your host, Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride.
And I'm Ted Bannock, and I love spoiling cards. And that's what we're going to do. We're doing two things. We're spoiling cards. We're thanking patrons.
Yeah.
Boom.
I didn't even have to say anything, Ted. That was good. We're gonna thank our patrons. So it's the dedicated patrons on this list that keep the lights on in the show. And so I just want to thank everybody on this list. We have Daniel, David, Jason, Joseph, Josh, who is new. Thank you, Josh. Justin. Let me go back to Josh real quick. Josh, it says Joshua, and I'm just so happy. I'm so used to calling Joshua's Josh's, but maybe he prefers Joshua, so I'll keep it Joshua until I hear otherwise. So, but then Justin, Kyle, Lou, Matt, Mike, Dominic, Phil, Rob, Robert, Russ, and Sean. Normally I'd spend a little bit of time talking about the patrons, but I think it's important for us to take some time and just get straight to the spoiler.
Get on with it.
As of recording, I think the spoiler article for the final AP of the game was spoiled just about 12 hours ago, maybe 10 hours ago. And so this is kind of a hot take for us talking about these cards. And I think we're planning on, as cards get spoiled and released, we're going to try to spoil as an honor for the game, this being the last AP. I think we're going to try to spoil all the cards, or at least have a spoiler episode for all the player cards in this AP, as they become known to the community through official means. So that'll be a lot of fun, and it's our way of honoring and giving thanks to this amazing game. So all of that to say, is that we had an amazing contract that was just revealed. So, Grant, do you want to let us see what the new contract is?
I suppose I can see them along for this ride. We're talking about the Bonds of Friendship contract. It states your deck must be exactly 50 cards and include 10 cards of each of the 4 spheres: leadership, law, spirit, and tactics. You cannot include more than 2 copies of any card by title in your deck. And when choosing your starting heroes, you may choose 4 heroes instead of 3. Each of your heroes must belong to a different sphere.
Wow, we're one host short of a Bond of Friendship podcast.
We are. We should reach out to Caleb and ask him to come on just to have Bond of Friendship. Ted, before I ask you about this, I just want to say that I don't know specifically, but I would like to think that this is a call out for Caleb, or from Caleb, about the TCBS, the Tea Club Barovian Society, which was made popular by the Tolkien movie. Him and 3 of his friends at King Edward School, they formed this little society where they got together and talked about writing and poetry, and it was very influential in his life. And I think that there's some inspiration from that part of Tolkien's own life in his writings with the 4 hobbits and the 4 hobbits coming together. And that's the picture, the art, the card art, which I love, by the way, on this contract, is 4 hobbits sitting around having a pint. It comes in pints. And so I think that I would like to think that it's a shout out. I'll talk to Caleb and see if that's actually true, but I just think it's an awesome final contract. And lastly, I'll say this, is that Caleb said that the contract that he most loved to play test was this one. We've been spoiling cards, and Caleb has come on the show several times, and he said that this contract was the best contract for him to play in terms of having fun with the game. So all of that. It seems like I'm doing a lot of talking here in the first 10 minutes of the show, but
there's a lot to cover, David. You're all right.
There is a lot to cover. So, Ted, what are your initial thoughts on Bond of Friendship?
Let me just say, wow, it's good to have friends, everybody. Holy smokes, 4-hero contract, sign me up. There's a lot of potential for this contract. You just built a lot of decks. Obviously there's plenty of Hobbit heroes to choose from, and that was the inspiration for this contract. And there's different Hobbit characters of different spheres. And the thing you have to think about when applying this contract is your starting threat, right? You could pick 4 heroes that all have a starting threat of 12, and then you're starting at 48 threat, and that maybe isn't such a good idea. But you could do it. This is so much potential. Hobbits pair really well with it. Since you can get your starting threat so high, you can consider a Valor deck, starting with 4 heroes, getting into 40 threat right away. And there's certain heroes that I think are going to be complementary to just having more heroes in play. And that is where these decks are going to be incredibly fun to play and are really, really going to shine. For example, I mentioned Hobbits. Let's think about Tactics Mary. He gets a bonus for each Hobbit hero you have. Well, now you got 4, right? Now he's got 4 attack. There's numerous bonuses where you're going to see heroes like that.
Is there any hero in the game that right out of the gate has 4 attack?
Bjorn. So technically, no. Wait, technically, yes, Quick Beam.
Right. So, I mean...
And then Bjorn has 5.
Right. So, I mean... But that's what I'm saying. Like,
but there's
Hobbit
not
becomes
many.
the best attacker, one of the best attackers of the game.
Yeah. He's as strong as an Ent, and Quick Beam is twice his threat.
Right.
Hero Quick Beam.
Right.
So, good point. A lot of great heroes that come to mind. Dwarf decks can benefit from Bond of Friendship. Think about Thorin, or characters that Thorin gets an extra resource for having 5 or more dwarfs in play. Well, you can have 4. Or if you got Bomber,
5
counts as 2. You start with 5 dwarfs in play.
Right.
It's crazy. So a lot of synergies just by having 4 heroes, not to mention the extra resource you get each round.
Right.
And then there's the deck restrictions, but we'll get into that afterwards.
Yeah. Right. I was about to cut you off anyways, because
thank you.
I have to go into a 4-minute spoiler diatribe here, but
right.
No.
And then everyone else gets itty-bitty living space.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
No, Grant.
Exactly. Grant, what's your take on this?
I'm actually thinking that Lord Elrond would be a good call for a deck here, because obviously he gains the resource smoothing of all allies. So he starts off with 13 threat, then he runs, say, Spirit Glorfindel, and then you've got 2 other heroes that you could potentially run out of different spheres to basically make it so that you've got all spheres covered, but you're still at a reasonable threat level. Yeah. And you've got the ability to play all your allies relatively smoothly with Elrond's ability.
Yeah, because Elrond you can play, as long as it's not 0 cost, you can play your allies from any sphere with his lore resource.
But what's really interesting that you guys pointed out, if you have Elrond in a Bond of Friendship deck, you will have 1 from each sphere, right? Because you're going to have a lore, tactics, a spirit, and leadership. So you can actually run 0 cost allies from any sphere in that deck, or reduce them down to 0 and play them as you see fit.
Right.
Friendship.
And so Radagast also gets around, like the Radagast staff issue. You're supposed to be able to play, like this gets around that wording as well. So that's always good.
Yes, because
right.
you'd have same case. Radagast also, he does sphere blending with his ability too.
I will say, just so that the community knows, that the intention of Radagast staff was to be able to pay reduced cost, even if it's 0, for creatures. Caleb has come out and said that there just hasn't been errata, and so he wants to be able. Caleb's intention with that is to be able to play 0 cost creatures. So make sure you play it that way. But back to heroes. Let's go down the list. So let's talk about hero selections that make, or hero lineups that make sense, and why they make sense. So Ted, you gave a couple of
several,
right. I mean, basically, whenever these contracts come out, I'm sure that the three of us can agree. We sit here and we theory craft about them like immediately. But hobbits are awesome because they're low threat, right?
Yep.
And I think Grant and Ted, as we look at this, you can actually come up with 2 separate bond of friendship decks to work as a fellowship with hobbits. So you can have 2 separate 4-sphere hobbit decks.
There's just enough to be able to do that,
I think, right? So if you have something like, I have notes here, guys. This is the first time I've ever had show notes in my life.
Well,
and it shows.
Technically not true, David.
Well, right, okay. Right. We did start off with show notes, but if you have something like Sam, Pippin, Fatty, and Tom in one deck, and then Frodo, Falco, Merry, and Lord Bilbo, you start off. That's one way to arrange them so you can do it.
Tactics Bilbo, right? Because Falco is lore.
Right, Tactics Bilbo. That's
Okay.
what I meant. And Spirit Mary. Tactics Spirit Mary. Sorry.
Yeah, you have to mess around with the spheres and things like that. Because what's nice is you have a lot of heroes too that have alternate versions, and this contract really lets you expand and kind of play around with that and figure out which version of that hero is best.
Right. And then, Grant, what could you imagine Katie playing this for? I mean, I know that it gives card restrictions, and Katie's never a 50 card player, but I mean, and that's fine. I'm not criticizing, but 4 dwarves. She's definitely a dwarf player. So,
it would definitely be something we'd be looking at some point. Whether or not she should go for it straight away or not is another matter, but definitely something we would look at for her.
So, what are the best 4 dwarves to pair? Can you? Who's the one who's the spirit one that gives the tactics resource icon? Owen. Okay. The lesser dwarves I always get screwed up. So
right.
So I think you have to include Owen.
Well, what we would probably go for is Dean, Ironfoot.
Which version?
That would be Leadership Dean.
Leadership Dean. Okay.
Would probably go for Phelan for tactics.
Yep, Fallon tactics. Corset from the Corset.
Yeah. Would probably go either Bomber or Ori for law.
Right, and Ori allows you, when you have 5 dwarves, to draw an extra one, I think, right?
And you're starting with 4, right? If you choose Ori as your lore.
And then you've got Nori for Spirit.
And then Nori is what?
Spirit.
No, but what is his ability?
That allows you to lower your threat for each dwarf you
put into play.
Which will help when you're starting off high threat for having a 4th hero.
Right.
Yep.
I mean, and of course there's a bajillion dwarf combinations. Like you could take out Leadership Dine and put in Thorin, put in Bomber. I mean, there's so many different substitutions that you could play. Then you have Narvi's Belt, which allows resource smoothing all across the board.
And Biffer's a great choice because he's not only a starting threat of 7, he can also transfer resources internally. So if you're not using your Spirit resource for the round. Give it to Biffer. Now you have 2 lore. Done.
Right.
There's so many archetypes
Right.
that will fit Bond of Friendship.
Okay, so Ted, I feel like you have another buried archetype in there that you want to make sure you release upon the world.
Other really, really great heroes
Yes.
that work well with this would be the Sylvan archetype and playing Thranduil. Or Thrandur. Thranduil. What's his name? I don't know.
Thranduil.
Right. Thranduil.
Yeah.
Thranduil's.
Right.
He's a phenomenal choice. He's a phenomenal choice because his combat action ability lets you play a Sylvan from your hand and not require a resource match. And you don't pay from his pool. They just don't require a match. So you take in combat action and you play a Sylvan for 2 and you just pay with whatever 4 resources you got that round. Right. Done.
And that's not to be overstated in this. So you have some restrictions about the cards that you can put in your hand, but you're generating an extra resource every turn.
Treebeard first turn. Done.
So right. Treebeard first
Ally
turn.
Treebeard. You use 4 resources, you put them on the table.
Host of the Glathrum first turn. Wait, no, that doesn't make sense. But, I mean, that extra resource is clutch. It's huge. I just can't imagine. So going back to the dwarf archetype real quick, that means that Thorin, in the very first resource phase, because you put your heroes out before that first resource phase, that means you're going to have 5 resources from the very beginning. That's a first turn Gandalf without even trying.
Yes, if you make
off with Bomber.
If you start off with Bomber as your lore and Thorin, you will start with 5 dwarfs in play. He will immediately collect his resource.
Yes.
Same thing with Oin. In that lineup, you will start the game, and he also has smoothing because he gets the tactics resource. So they're already a phenomenal
right. So
deck.
You have 2 tactics resources. That's your veteran axe hand that can come out. It's just I don't this is wild. The amount of combinations that you can put together here. I mean, of course you can go Gondor deck. You can do, but I don't know. It just seems like the Ent Hobbit archetype is going well. You can have Treebeard and Quickbeam, and then you can have Leadership Frodo to keep your threat down, and and then you can have Spirit Mary to help you keep Spirit Mary, right, to keep your threat down too.
You could shuffle that around to have probably 2 Ents, Quickbeam, Treebeard, and then Spirit Mary, and I guess you can't fit Pippin because you already used a lore and a spirit hero.
Right.
But you can do some shuffling around, figure that out.
Yep. And so what's the most heroes that you could have out at one time now?
5.
I think you could have 6 easy, right? Because you can have Thalion, who turns into a hero.
All right. Well, I was talking about base heroes that you can start the game off with.
Oh! I'm talking about at one time, at any point in the game, you can Sword Thane one, you can turn Thalion into one that's 6.
Then technically it's 7 because you could play the sagas and get the free.
If you're playing some weird Kaldara deck, or you get rid, all of a sudden Imrahil becomes a hero. But I guess when the hero comes back,
you kind of net. Yeah, you net 0 with Imrahil.
Right.
You have to have a dead hero. But to answer your question, you could have 6 heroes in a deck with a Sword Thane attachment to make a unique ally hero, and then triggering Thalin's ability, who becomes a hero after you have 3 side quests in the victory display.
There's got to be other things that could. I mean, so thinking about the limitations of this, because it's so much fun to talk about these spoilers. Because first of all, I'm just horrible at thinking about spoilers cards because I just can't. My brain can't process all the crazy stuff that's going on, so I'm just way ahead of myself a million times. But you can't use other contracts. Contracts are limited to 1 per build, so you can't MOTK something. Messenger of the King And like you can't do that in this case because that's a separate contract. So you have to use the actual heroes that are printed, which is still well over 100, but there's about 27 or 28 heroes in each sphere. So I mean, that gives you a lot of options. But what about Grant? What about the other limitations there? About building a deck that's 50, that's exactly 50 player cards.
You've got limitations to the fact of you can only use 2 copies of each card in your deck. So that's only 2 copies of Deeran's Rules, 2 copies of Unexpected Courage. So that limits you on how many times you can actually draw the card you want because you've got less copies in there. But it also gives you more chance of drawing what you need because you've got less cards in your deck to clutter it up with.
Right. Yeah, I mean you have to be very particular about which cards you're picking because I think as you build these decks, I've kind of tinkered with this just a little bit, but I think like as you have all the spheres, you just can't put every awesome card in the sphere in a deck and go with it because then you don't have any. Like you're stuck with 2 sneak attacks, 2 Steward of Gondors, and then if you're playing hobbits, then you have Hobbit Cloak, Staff of Lebethron, Bill the Pony, and where do you put Rosie? Okay, you get rid of the Staff of Lebethron, now you put Rosie, but then what do you how do you deal with like those decisions, like do you put one of each? Those decisions make it really tough. So Ted, what's your thoughts on the deck building restrictions that this contract gives you?
Yeah, it's interesting because the contract, it's really weird because it explicitly says you have to have 10 from each sphere, and then you have to kind of put in the missing piece. That means your deck has to have 10 neutral cards.
Right.
Well, and that card pool is not as big as the other spheres.
Right. Grant, what were you going to say?
No, I was just rereading the contract. I thought it was a minimum of 10 from each sphere up to 50, but it's not. You've literally got to have 10 neutral cards in your deck.
It says exactly 10.
Yeah.
And so that's actually a good place for us to actually really start because, the cards in each sphere will vary probably depending on, whether you're running Sylvans or Dwarves or Hobbits or whatever you're doing. But, so what are the neutral cards that come to mind? I mean, of course, Gandalf and Treebeard are really good allies, but, I mean, you don't have much. What's that, Grant?
I think the songs, like the Songs of Wisdom, the Song of Battle, the Song of Kings, and the Song of Travel would come in to play at this point.
I agree with you, but I'm going to say that it's also funny because you can't lean the deck to be 40 tactics cards. Like if you're playing with Owen and another tactics hero, you're stuck. You're stuck with just 10 cards evenly distributed. So you have to. That limitation is brilliant. Damn you, Caleb! Damn you.
The songs will let you. It'll help you blend to play more expensive cards.
Right.
Yeah.
You'll find it'll be difficult to play a 3-cost card in this deck without tricks or acceleration, which there's plenty of because you have access to all 4 spheres. Right. There's a lot of good 0-cost leadership cards that can give you extra resources. Like Wealth of Gondor, for example, 0-cost event gives you 1 resource on any Gondor hero. Well, if you have a lore Gondor hero like Denethor, then you could just give him the resource, or Baragond, who comes in Spirit and Tactics flavors. You have a lot of synergies and ways to build around your heroes, but you got to watch the restrictions.
This is where Tactics Immerhill comes into play, right? So you don't play actually any cards during planning, and you just use the one, or you don't play any, you just use the one that he gives you.
And you bring out an ally that matches one of his traits.
Right. But back to the neutral cards. So what other neutral? I guess also the neutral cards will depend because you have the songs, like Grant said. You have, Gandalf, Treebeard we talked about, but,
There's 2 neutral side quests too. One of which is the Storm Comes, which we should point out.
Which is,
Storm
I think,
Comes.
a great include, right?
Yeah, it lets you when you complete. It's 0 to play. I think it's 4 to complete.
Grant will look that up.
Yeah, Grant check.
Grant's
and
who had bum internet all night long. We're gonna make him look.
We're gonna make him do the internet research. When Storm Comes is in the victor display, it doesn't require allies to have resource matches. So if you pick your lore hero to be Thurindir, who's the lore hero, who's got 8 threat, and lets you search for a side quest. Well, he's low threat.
Right.
And then you look for Storm Comes and you start with it, and then when you complete it, he also gets the willpower boost. He gets +1 for each side quest in the victory display. And then you also run Thalin as a neutral card. Or not Thalin, Thalin.
Right. Thalion.
Thalion, thank you. Thalion, who is a neutral ally that cost 4, so you can play him first turn too.
Right.
There's lots of good choices. White Council, a good Harvest.
If you're playing
is
one
a
of the
natural neutral card that lets you sphere blend.
Right. And get some reduction, right? Oh, I'm thinking of a good meal, not a good harvest. Sorry.
Good meal.
Good meal is good for Hobbit decks. Grant, just right before you say something, I will say that I think also spoiled with this pack is the guys at Cardboard of the Ring spoiled this card, but Thorngil is a 3-card neutral attachment, which then allows you to bring in a hero that matches the name of a hero in play. So I think that is...
so many possibilities.
I think that's a really good card. Like if you're playing Leadership Dine, and now you have Spirit... Now you can bring in Spirit Dine. It's crazy, right? Okay, so what were you going to say, Grant? I wanted to make sure I got that out there before.
Just going back to the Storm Comes, it is 0 cost, but it's 5 progress that it takes to complete.
Okay. But you also have an extra hero, right? So you have more willpower on the board to probably get that side quest done first turn.
Right. Are there specific heroes that you look at and you're like, let's not do this? I think like Tactics Theoden. Maybe not.
Yes.
You know, obviously you're not going to. I mean, he's good.
Unless, maybe in multiplayer.
If you're going to play
right?
multiplayer.
He's kind of good in multiplayer anyway. Like, global boosting is good multiplayer.
Sure.
So he still maybe has a rule there, like a place there. But
right.
You're right. Like, outside of that, like, not as strong a choice for 12 threat.
Right. Because you're only adding... There's only one tactics hero that you're going to deal with.
Right. So he's good to boost himself, and you can get 3 willpower out of...
Yeah,
for a lot less threat than 12.
Which is fine for a tactics hero, you get 3.
Mm-hmm.
But what about you, Grant? Can you think of a card like a non-bow? Wake up. Poor Grant. We're recording it at 9:30 Eastern time, and so it's like 3 o'clock in the morning over with Grant. He's had internet problems, so now I'm putting him on the spot. I'm like, Grant, what's a card that's not going to work with this country?
I think mainly cards that need to boost off other characters, like Ted said. Like as I said, Tactics Theoden. So cards that require other like same spheres to boost themselves or to be boosted by each other.
Right. There's a whole Merland, right. But Falco is a really good
terrible
hero, right? Falco because now his starting threat is pseudo 3, right? Because it's 7 normally, and then it's -1 for each Hobbit that you're playing. If you're going to play 4 Hobbits.
All the Hobbits have huge benefits, which they should, right?
Right.
Right.
Ted, your guy can't be used.
My guy?
Yeah, your guy. Your favorite hero in the whole dang game.
In the whole dang game.
Right.
He's thinking now.
Who's that?
Gandalf?
Oh,
Neutral
yeah.
Gandalf, right? You can't use neutral Gandalf.
He is friends with no one. So what you do is you run a Bond of Friendship deck with 4 hobbits and Grey Wanderer Gandalf. Pow.
Right. And then you have your 5 hero deck. No. Yeah, I mean, so I just think this is going to be an exciting contract to build around. You know, like, you just can't. There was a couple other things that I had in my head rattling around, but this goes back to my, my discombobulation in my own head about building these things. I had like 17 thoughts about cards to use and cards not to use. Oh, I was going to say it automatically gets rid of all those cards that are, must use 1 from each sphere or each hero to pay for this. So like the Great Hunt. You can't use the Great Hunt unless you get out the 2 copies of the Song of Travel onto 2 other heroes. So, I think that limits your deck building because there's those sorts of limitations that. And the Great Hunt, I love the Great Hunt. It's one of my favorite new cards out there. I know Mr. Underhill loves the Great Hunt too. So, I don't know.
Yeah, we barely scratched the surface. There's
I know we
so
barely
many possibilities.
I know.
It's like, because really any hero, there is a whole bunch of heroes too that offer some type of sphere blending. Like we mentioned Oin, we mentioned Biffer, the 3 elves that can wield the rings. You can include only 2 copies of the rings in your deck,
right?
But it'll add a sphere icon to them and counts as 2 of your neutral cards.
Right.
Elrond, Galadriel, and Círdan.
Yep.
Círdan, right.
For Nenya, Narya, Vilya.
Right. Vilya or Voncha.
You will. Play 4 heroes.
Right. And then, so you can't use Gandalf, but Saruman allows you to. Doesn't his Saruman hero have Spirit Blending for Doom cards?
Yeah, he can play Doom cards
then,
all the time.
Right.
He may not be a great choice just because you're going to start with 4 heroes. His own threat is 13, and then you're playing Doom cards on top of it. So if you want to get real bold.
Right. I know. I mean,
but
it's wild to think about all the different crazy things. I mean, we could literally go down through the list of the 100+ heroes and say whether this is good and come up with 17 options for how to play this. And, like, that's how exciting this has gotten. So, Caleb, I agree with you. Maybe it's just because of Call to the Noob, but this Bond of Friendship card seems to be a lot of fun.
And thanks to this, you now have a reason to put Fatty in a deck.
Yeah, Fatty would never say. John, where our buddy Electron John from Cardboard of the Rings, he did an episode on Fatties. So
that's right. Check it out.
Yeah.
You can now thematically run the black. You can run the whole Black Riders lineup through
right. You can
through Black Riders if you want.
If you wanted to.
Yeah. So that'll be a fun. You do a lot of fun thematic things too.
Right.
I mean, if you wanted to go through the entire Saga campaign with the 7 of the 9 walkers, you can.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you could play 2 Bond of Friendship decks and play the whole thing with all 9 walkers if you wanted to. Oh, you can't play Gandalf, so you'll just have to sneak attack.
You could play Overhill and Underhill Gandalf.
Yeah, you could play Overhill, Underhill Gandalf with someone who's playing Lord Aragorn and
Gandalf.
So many things.
Right.
All of the things.
I know. It's wild to think about. It's funny. We started with an episode of Card Talk, and an episode of Three is Company just broke out because we've been talking about this for almost for like 4 hours and 17 minutes now. I love you guys over there, Liam, Joseph, Ryan. We love you guys. But I think we should probably cut the discussion here, and
we could go on.
We could go on forever and ever, But I don't know. Anyways, so typically we don't rank a card on our highly arbitrary yet scientific scale. Highly scientific yet arbitrary scale. I don't know, whichever one it is. It changes every episode. But we usually give our impressions of the card just, to see what it is. So, Grant, what is your excitement level for Bond of Friendship?
It's going to be fun to test out.
Yeah. Totally agree with that. Ted, what's your...
Yeah, I gotta agree with Grant. It's going to be an absolute blast to play and to tinker with. Will it lend itself great for every quest in the game? Probably not. There's several quests.
Escape from Dol Guldur. You still start with 3 heroes.
You'll start with 3 heroes. You lose access to 25% of your deck, but
20%.
It'll also give you a chance to, or 20%. Thank you. To get some variety, because even though you are building a smaller deck, you're only running 2 copies of each. So much like a larger deck would give you more variety, this will still do the same thing and still be, I think, fairly consistent and very fun to play. So I'm very excited. What about you, David?
Well, I'll echo what both of you said. I think it's just going to be a lot of fun to play. But I think that nuance of exactly 10 cards from each sphere, I think that's where it's going to be really interesting building. We theory crafted the heck out of this card by talking about ally or heroes to choose. But when you only have 10 cards, and we touched on it briefly at the beginning of the show or the middle of the show, but when you only have 10 cards from the leadership sphere, which 10 lore cards do you want? And right. 2 of them are probably going to be Warden or Aorith or both. Right. So it's, and then do you drop down to 1? I think it opens up a whole bunch of fun and exciting opportunities. And I think that's because you're going to want more than only 5 different leadership cards in your deck, or more than 5 lore cards in your deck. So you're going to have to choose to play 1 copy of each. And so I just think that's going to be fun. So anyways, I'm excited to play this. You guys are excited to play this. And we are happy that we were able to give you guys out there in LOTR LCG community a spoiler about this card. So everybody, we'll see you later, and have a great night. And if you're interested in finding this or any of our back episodes of Card Talk, feel free to search YouTube, where you can find our flagship video episodes with the username Card Talk 2018. Or you can search the RSS feed, cardtalk2018.libsyn.org, for our extended audio versions of our podcast. Or you can find us on Facebook at Card Talk 2018. And if you have any questions for Grant or myself, or for both of us, feel free to email us at cardtalk2018@gmail.com.